Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Daniel, for setting the context for the DAOs and Community Day at the Celo Salon. My name is Anna. I work with Daniel on community development at the Celo Foundation. And I'm really excited to be joined on stage today to talk about funding community, because I think we're at a very pivotal point, both at the Celo Foundation and at the Celo protocol, the Celo community at large. A year ago, this was a very, very different place, and it's really special for me to be on stage with everyone today because it's actually also exactly 1 year anniversary since I started at Celo. So it's really interesting for me.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. It's a really, really special day. So it was a very different place last year, a year ago. You know, we had the Celo Foundation has just defined itself as a separate entity from C Labs, was kind of like navigating what that meant, what its role is for ecosystem and community building. And at that time, we only had one independent on-chain fund, the CCF, which was just pretty small. And now, a year later, we have 3 independent on-chain funds that are independent entities. We have 2 of them with us today. We have Ocelot and we have Prezenti, formerly CCF, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then we also have Climate Collective that are all independent entities in the Celo ecosystem. And then we still have Celo Foundation. We have Kevin representing the foundation today. And I think it's wonderful to have independent thinking, independent process, and independent funding to essentially build a resilient and the best community and ecosystem possible, because we're all here working towards the same mission of prosperity for all. So yeah, we're here today to talk about these different sources of funding and how we all think about supporting this mission. And with that, let's just go into a round of intros. Introduce yourself and the fund you represent, and then we'll go into a round of questions. I'll pass it over to Kevin.
Hi everyone. So I'm from the foundation here, representing the grants program. A bit about myself. I've traversed different career paths. I started as a banker and then moved to development corporation, worked for, from Citi, worked for the Swiss Development Agency, and then worked for GIZ. Started working in crypto back in 2018 with Ocean Protocol, and then a bunch of other Berlin-based startups, and then working with Celo since the beginning of last year. Yeah, I mean, so I represent the foundation. Yeah, that answers your question, I guess.
Thank you. Jarrell.
Hi, whoa. I'm Jarrell, and so I come from a background of computer science and philosophy, and I really put a lot of that effort towards emerging technologies like molecular modeling and things like that, and computational chemistry. Then I found crypto, and I was like, well, there's a lot more open design space here, and a lot more like social engineering to be done, which is a lot more interesting. And so I started publishing papers on specifically like African ecosystem and things that would like make Web3 tooling applicable to them. And so then Celo found me. I found Celo through some like thing. I think it was East Denver. And then I worked on Celo for a little over a year and did a lot of things. And now I do my own project called Entropy, and yeah, focused on decentralized custody.
Nice. Aaron?
Cool. Hi, everyone. Aaron Boyd here. I'm a little bit worried. I also came from a banking background as well. I didn't know that, Kevin. I'm a career software engineer. I've been involved in the Celo ecosystem since Genesis as a validator. I run a validator group called Gladiator Labs. And recently, I've been one of the stewards that was approved by governance for the Prezenti Community Fund, which is the second iteration of the Celo Community Fund. I'll keep it short and sweet. So.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, and so we're here to talk today about the difference between kind of like how these 3 separate funds think about.
Oh yeah, mine's called Ocelot. I don't know if we actually ever said that.
I was gonna loop it back to you to let you
Nice.
introduce it. Yes, so yeah, we have Prezenti, we have CCF, we have Ocelot, and we have the Foundation Grants Program. So to give a little bit more background, I guess, let's go into like what is the funding thesis for each individual entity, and what is the mission, and how does that support the overall growth of Celo community and ecosystem? And I'll pass it back to Aaron to go back the other way.
Oh, sure. Actually, do you mind if I started with maybe just explaining where that money comes from and how it fits into the protocol?
Absolutely.
Because it actually wasn't clear to me when the CCF was around last year. I was sort of like, oh, this is some Celo entity, not realizing it was actually built into the protocol, every epoch, a small portion of the rewards gets put into kind of a bucket, and CCF was pulling an approval on that bucket to, spend those funds in the community. So just sort of putting that context in place. But so Prezenti is the second iteration of that. So we've got a governance approval to pull on those funds as well, a fixed amount that we can spend over the next, well, we're intending for 12 months. And our thesis has a fair bit of crossover with the goals of Celo, because it's, we're there kind of as stewards, it's not a profit-making entity. So that's why I'm kind of wearing the shirt here. Our goals are very similar to the foundation. Our thesis is we're planning to put up sort of 4 buckets that you can apply for, and they're very similar to, well, what we wrote in the governance proposal, similar to CCF1, which is community tooling, research, education, and kind of a miscellaneous bucket for any kind of innovative things that we haven't covered for. And our thesis is more what we're interested in of the 3 of us. So there's myself, Maya, and Wade, who's also been a validator since Genesis. He's very deeply involved in the Celo ecosystem. And Maya has a very strong philanthropic background. So we're looking to kind of get back to the roots of blockchain, which, Celo is very aligned with the kind of prosperity for all, and moving away from the kind of extractive policies where, there's a lot of hype around number go up, everyone makes as much money as possible, DeFi, put your money here and there, and kind of missing a lot of the point of the original, I guess, idealism of blockchain in a way. I've been around since the early days, like 2013, on the periphery of blockchain, and back then it was all about, banking the unbanked and cheap remittances and cheap payments and financial sovereignty. And I think Celo is fairly well aligned with these kind of things, especially in the developing world and so on. So we kind of want to get back a little bit to the roots of those.
Amazing. Thank you, Jarrell.
No, the direct question was funding and like how we go about it.
Yeah. So what is your funding thesis for Ocelot, and what is the mission of Ocelot, and what kinds of I guess how does that relate to funding community? Celo?
So for us, it was like the CCF existed, the Celo Community Fund existed, and then there was getting portions from like the on-chain validator fund, and that was like where they were getting funds. And that was started by Deepak, who was just OG validators like yourself. And where I was coming from is I've just been involved in a lot of decentralized ecosystems, and Yaz, myself, and Gabrielle were like sitting there and basically like, hey, we should have more than one funding source in this ecosystem. And at the time, since Celo was so nascent, there was like $80 million sitting in like this on-chain community fund. And so we came up with a thesis around like what can Celo be doing that's not what it's already doing. And like what it was already doing was very like, yes, mission focused, yes, focused on a lot of these, what I would call like leapfrog nations and communities where there was like immediate remittances to be done. However, that tech was attracting a lot of people who'd worked in like Web 2 payments infrastructures and were trying to come over to Web 3. And for what we were seeing, since we'd been like very OG in the decentralized ecosystems of Web 3, we were seeing like a need to like get original OG talent from like Ethereum and various other like layer 1s and layer 2 ecosystems and take that like hard talent and apply it to the mission of Celo, because what we were really doing was we were attracting a lot of people who were interested in the mission and then developing the talent, and our thesis was like that leads to stagnation over time unless like somebody immediately becomes like an incredible genius and shares with everyone else. It's easier if you just approach people who are already like established geniuses in their fields and then port their information, their knowledge, and their like passion over to a new mission, if you can. And it wasn't even a new mission because our thesis essentially was like everybody in Web3 is likely aligned with the Celo mission because of the origins of Ethereum, the origins of this idea of remittances across borders and stuff like that. It was more about people forgetting that amidst all of the number go up and the money that they were making. And so the idea wasn't necessarily go after people who are mission aligned developers, mission aligned this, mission aligned that. The thesis was assume everyone's mission aligned and then find the talent that can like really elevate and take this protocol to the next level.
Amazing, yeah. And Kevin, what is the, I guess, yeah, can you expand on the thesis for the Celo Foundation Grants Program?
Yeah, so I think the way we work at the foundation is like to look at the broader ecosystem and think about it in terms of public good. And so what we do is that, when we are, working with a project that is seeking a grant, we try to understand what kind of impact, that it would have in the ecosystem. So the impact is in terms of, like active devs, how many users can be onboarded, the number of developers and builders, composability, like how many dApps can start using the protocol or the tooling or the dApp that they are building. So that's essentially our focus. We keep it more open so that we attract a kind of a diverse set of applications rather than one very specific theme. Because the spread is too large, and you need to keep space for innovation, and the innovation happens when you have like volumes of applications. At the same time, you have the ability to review and see what makes sense. So the idea is for us to at the grants program is to think about working with projects as partners and see grants as a part of that partnership. What we want to do is we want to have long-term impact with what we do in terms of the grants. And composability, liquidity, active devs, that's kind of like the sort of broad themes that we try to focus on with public goods, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so that's a little bit about, I guess, independent thinking. I think independent thinking and independent entities provide a lot of resilience to the ecosystem and the kinds of things that you think need to be built. I want to shift into a little bit of like independent process, because each fund has its own process and its own kind of person that they're looking for, or a group of people or individuals that they're looking to fund. And I think what would be really valuable for our community in terms of this panel is to understand a lot more about like, what do you look for in projects, what kinds of projects should be applying, and also like navigating the ecosystem. I know it can be super complicated, like because I work in community at the Celo Foundation, people come to us all the time and it's like how they want to get involved, but there's like so many different avenues, there's so many different things. So I want to spend a bunch of time discussing kind of like independent process and what makes each process different and what people can expect. But to just kick it off, let's do a little bit of a recap of like the verticals that each fund serves. So yeah, Kevin, you mentioned that we have, like each fund has different verticals that you kind of are interested in focusing on. So yeah, if you can just expand a little bit on that to give people clarity. And yeah, Jarrell, you're welcome to start.
Yeah, so we are we're very interested in transparency and being open about like what our focuses are. And so in our original CGP 43 proposal to the community, we broke it into like 4 buckets essentially, which was like work in leapfrog nations and a lot of like stuff that's already being done in the Celo ecosystem, and with that intent of like creating DAOs in places like Brazil, things like that. And then there's other pillars around like creating like DAOs and community type things. But our biggest pillar was something that we saw lacking in the Celo ecosystem was we wanted to move away from the copy and pasta things that happen in new layer 1 ecosystems, which is a totally valid form of growth, and growth hacking is like, hey, that worked, and then we're going to apply it here. But the pillar that we focused on for the community was the idea of radical experimentation, and recognizing that there were parts of the technology stack that were just radically different than other layer 1s, and there was something to be done about applying that and making new interesting things that would attract developer talent that's actually very of a high caliber. And so that was like, if we were doing something interesting that no one else is doing, and we do that well, then we will attract people who want to do things that are interesting and could go work anywhere tomorrow, but they don't want to work there tomorrow, they want to work on something interesting. And that has been super successful in regards to our like flagship radical experiment, which is an incentivized testnet called Mescal. And that was where we really proved our thesis around, if you publish a paper around wanting to build something interesting, people who are interested and talented will come in and be excited about it. I think we got like 700 or 800 like Twitter followers in like a day, and then just like this whole explosion around the idea of essentially a DAO proposing an incentivized testnet to help scale, the mission of Celo. And we were just proposing it in a very interesting way on Celestia and stuff, and it got the Ethereum community and it got a bunch of other communities excited about this because they know it had proposed it. And so that was where our thesis around radical experimentation was kind of proven for us, where we're like, yes, there is interesting things to be done on Celo, not that there aren't already, but like there are things that we can project out to the other like high caliber Web3 native devs, and they will latch on to this mission. So.
Amazing. Yeah, and Aaron, perhaps Prezenti is a newer fund in the ecosystem, but it is taking over some similar verticals. So if you want to just expand on what you hope to fund based on the proposal that you've put together.
Yeah, I guess we're kind of the opposite of the radical part, looking for more of the, brick and mortar, not brick and mortar, but kind of the base layer, things that still need to be done in any kind of burgeoning layer one. So, I mentioned before the 4 areas we're kind of put in the governance proposal, which is community toolings, which is, the more traditional websites, block explorers. It's not, it's quite true that it's not really revolutionary in that sense. But Maya and I had a good session together last week in preparation for this, kind of thinking about, do we have any, what's our sort of differentiator in values? And we really sort of honed in on, we sort of had a bit of a talk about the research and education part, especially, if we as a community, blockchain or Celo in a whole is missing perhaps segments of people or perhaps some cultural knowledge or sensitivities in certain areas. So we kind of discussed that and we're like, it would be really great to even put the grant proposal the other way and say, look, we think we're really missing this type of survey or this type of research. Is there anyone out there who'd like to do that? Like maybe even, pushing into academia and saying, look, is there a student body who's interested in researching this type of thing, So that's something we're going to work on as well, and maybe fine-tune a bit of those focus areas and perhaps give people maybe some ideas that they can then apply for, from the outside. So.
That's interesting that you say that because, and I think that we should work together on this because internally we were talking similarly around basically making a list of things that are in our way, it would be like radical experiments that should be done. But like, yeah, how do you incentivize an ecosystem? And there's always like, let's build incentivization like models and like get people tokens and things. But actually like a lot of the overhead and maybe what you guys are circling as well, a lot of the overhead for people is like pretty cerebral. And it's like thinking through all these processes and like what's actually useful and what's going to get me attention in this attention market. And that is where we've been like, well, we should help the community know what is actually useful, what's feasible to be built.
Yeah, exactly. Maya was speaking to me about her experience sort of in the philanthropic world, and a lot of people just still don't trust like technology or digital tokens or crypto, blockchain in general, and sort of getting that information out there and developing that trust takes time and it takes outreach, and a lot of it isn't a block explorer or anything that's on a computer.
Yeah, you're beating me to it. That was going to be, the next section was going to be how do we, if any way, collaborate between the funds. But Kevin, take us home. What are the foundation pillars and buckets?
Yeah, so, because we have like a broad sweep of kind of grants that we do, so what we typically do is that, we have portfolio leads in the foundation who are leading a certain initiative or looking at a certain piece in terms of the category or portfolio of grants. So, for example, like, there's a DeFi lead or someone who's actually doing both program management and also BD, for example, trying to onboard more DeFi Legos onto the ecosystem. So talking about community funding, as we get the inbound applications, we set up a review committee, which is headed by someone who is a portfolio lead for that particular category, and then we typically take like a week time to review it, and then we get back to the applicant about what the next steps are. And this is sort of like across different portfolios. So like DeFi is one thing, ReFi, NFTs, developer grants, and that's how we kind of do it. And yeah, of course, Anna with community grants as well. So yeah, I think for us the the approach is to just figure out like internally how to just streamline within the foundation, how to make sure that we are able to sustain a certain volume and, get back to the applicants. So that's the inbound part. And also, of course, we also do the strategic grants, which is more about thinking more in terms of strategic partnerships for which grant becomes an element. And yeah, so that's how we kind of look at the portfolios.
Yeah, and I, along together with Daniel, we run the education and community arm of the foundation grants program. But I know also Ocelot and also Prezenti, you're all really interested in funding community and have different thoughts around how you see community growth and in general community development in the Celo ecosystem. So I wanted to go into the question around, like, if someone is in the community and has great ideas and doesn't really know how to get started, I guess, what can they expect applying to each individual fund, and what kinds of, what is the process around, and also what is your review process like? Kevin touched a little bit about the foundation grants process review, but what is review like at each fund? So like if someone goes and applies with a proposal, what can they expect in terms of process? If we can get started, maybe. Yeah, well, Kevin, if you want to go.
Yeah, I can just continue where I stopped. So, I mean, for us, we have like an open application process, so you can apply anytime, and we take our, we review it on a rolling basis. Like I mentioned, like we set up a committee and we have it reviewed, so we get some diversity of opinions about the tech, about the business side of things, and also like in terms of like what they're building, whether it makes sense. I think in terms of the process, what we try to outline is, so at the foundation there are actually 2 people who are managing this. What we try to do is end-to-end, we take at least up to 3 weeks right from application, reviewing, interviewing, scoping, and just doing all the DD and agreement. And that's how we try to just streamline it. We have like a open page called celoecosystem.com/grants where anyone can like apply for a grant. If you're keen on applying for a grant, that's basically the URL. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, Jarrell.
So mine like pulls from a couple different areas. One of the things that I did at Celo was with Daniel here was on like research around builders and people who are trying to start off like essentially their livelihoods on these layer 1 networks, and really like taking that seriously and saying, okay, if someone's trying to start their livelihood that's going to support their family on this network, what is the like fastest way to success for them? And so there was a lot of really great insights from that. One of those being that people wanted to feel like they were building alongside the founders of the layer 1 network. And to people who are just entering a community, the founders is really just anyone who's actually on the core team initially. And so like they want to feel like the core team's working with them. But what I learned over time is like you actually have to create scalable models of attention that you can give these people. And like you can't just start off giving someone a ton of attention and getting them where they need to be and then like leave them alone, because most likely they did not figure out how to get there on their own. So it was about creating processes for us that was like, okay, we're really interested in your mission, or people would apply and come towards us and say like, hey, this is what we want to do, and it'd be like a really cool idea, but I'll be very honest with them about the fact that it's a really cool idea. And really for us, it was becoming really honest with them about like areas where they could find support in the ecosystem, and making like essentially, I don't want to say like a planner or like a success like plan for them. I don't know what the word here is, but it was kind of like creating this like curated experience for them and the Celo ecosystem, right? And then doing what we could to make the introductions to folks. Like people had like incentive models they wanted to build behind like a stable coin, like yield project. It's like, okay, well, we know Alex from like the finance part of Celo. Like we can get you in a conversation with him, and like we'll be there and we'll talk to him for you and kind of rep, and then we'll see where we need to go from there. And so it was like we could give them like 4 checkpoints that we could steward them through. It doesn't really matter if we in the end are giving them millions and millions of dollars or $100,000 or like, just a small $5,000 grant. It matters that like they can get the money from us, and then they know like 6 or 7 resources within the community where they can get a lot more money. Because our goal is not to be like the biggest fund in the ecosystem. Our goal is just like essentially create a siphon for really like talented, high caliber, but also like interested people.
Got it. Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah. So your question was sort of about what's the process for
the process,
for
yeah.
applicants?
And also a little bit about the review process, since like because of the independent process is one of the differentiating factors between the different funds. I guess, like, what is the review process like, and what is the process for a grantee who comes to you and applies? What can they expect from you?
Yeah. So we're still actually building the kind of application process. We were chatting yesterday about actually using Questbook, which is a great little project that's probably going to be 100% used by us, hopefully. So our goal is to put as much detail in the application process as possible, so we don't have to, go back and forth. That kind of churn of communication is what takes up a lot of the time, and we learnt a lot of lessons from CCF1. Their administrative load was immense, and so thank you very much to Patrick D and Deepak for all of the little tips. So we're trying to make it as streamlined as possible, get as much information up front. And we also want the applicants to almost define their own milestones, so it's not just kind of one big drop of like, here's a cash, go off into the sunset and do your work. So we want to make it that we're touching base with them more frequently. So in the application form, we're going to say, look, what are the kind of 5 measurable metrics or deliverables that you think you're going to achieve? And we're kind of going to keep in touch with them more frequently, and sort of, pay to those if possible. But in terms of the review process, so they'll submit the form. We, as the 3 of us, and with our kind of experience and knowledge of the ecosystem, will read through that. If it needs a little bit more information, or if the milestones aren't really clear enough, then we'll have that back and forth communication with the applicant. Additionally, in the governance proposal, and this is sort of a long-term goal over the stewardship of Prezenti, we also want to potentially tap perhaps subject matter experts, in local areas to help us out with that review process as well. And so, we put that in the governance process. We're willing to, pay people to help us with things that we just don't have the knowledge on. So, for example, if we get an application for a savings circle in Cambodia or something. I mean, I'm not in the best position to review whether that's, a valid idea and whether it makes sense, and, all of the things that they put in the application. So, I can look at it from a technical point of view, and within my experience as a, as a developer I live in Germany, and, so we're really looking to make sure we're covering our blind spots where we just, I don't really know if this is a workable idea or not. So, yeah, trying to, and to your point, Jarrell, about connecting people with who they need, like after the process. I think it's a really good point, and we want to make sure the same thing happens, that we kind of get people started, and then they're not just kind of left floundering in a sense.
Yeah, I just want to add one note on top of that. I did this at the foundation or when I was there, but doing this a lot now as well, which is in any kind of like gold rush, there are, towns that go from like 7,000 to like 800,000, 200,000 people, because they're like tons of people coming to try and get resources and make this name for themselves. But so what I would do was look at places where like essentially the Ethereum gold rush had happened and people were promised a lot of things, but essentially over time abandoned by pretty much the Ethereum ecosystem, just because a lot of people made a lot of money really quickly and went off and did different things. And one of those was like a region like Lagos. And it was like, there's so much being done in Lagos. And when they did, like Ethereum went there and said, hey, we want to bring on, like that was specifically a city that sure as shit like answered that call. And then I was talking to them and interviewing them, and the feelings they had was like, hey, we did answer the call. We all learned Solidity. We're all a bunch of developers down here doing things, and we want to hustle. But it seems like everyone's forgotten about us, And so that's where I think Celo made some great inroads in places like Lagos, was saying, hey, we don't want to like this gold rush to end for you guys, essentially. Like this isn't just for them or for those folks. And that has been an area where if we get an application from those regions, or someone just DMs me on Twitter from those regions, I try not to immediately discount anything. Like I tend to be very critical when I'm reading things like proposals, but I'm like, all right, let's flush this out a little bit. Let's see where it is, because I have to remember that they didn't really have exposure to all of this like crazy crypto Twitter, like threads and ideation over the last couple of years. They've just, in a lot of ways, been in these silos.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying about also learning from all of the other funds. I think that's what's so exciting about having all of these different entities now because you're able to learn from one another, you're able to like see, and also from other ecosystems too, like see where there were maybe missed opportunities and then tap into that. I want to shift gears a little bit into, so obviously the difference between like centralized and decentralized sources of funding. This is the third pillar that I kind of wanted to get into today, like independent funding. And obviously Prezenti and Ocelot have both tapped into governance funds. So how do you think about, I guess, getting like, since you have to a way be accountable to, I mean, all of us have to be accountable to our community, and also especially the Celo Foundation, but how do you think about getting community sentiment for the kinds of proposals that you're funding, and how do you think about reporting to the community that has voted and entrusted you to be stewards of these funds? How you think about, yeah, how do you think about that? And you can, Jarrell or Aaron, you're welcome to start.
Yeah, I can start, I guess. In terms of the second thing about reporting, I think that's quite clear. And you know, I bumped into Yaz on Monday, and he was, you know, imparting the same thing. Just transparency is the name of the game, and yeah, we're committing to do the same thing. Of course, all of our transactions and everything we fund will be publicly available. Of course, we're going to hide personal details or perhaps commercially sensitive information before the project is launched and so on. But yeah, I think blockchain is the perfect technology for transparency, so I think that's quite easy. On the first part about, you know, how do we keep ourselves accountable to the community? Yeah, I guess there's once the governance approval has been done, right, there is a risk there that we don't, you know, fulfill the wishes of the community, or that we go off the rails and do whatever we want. And I guess a lot of that comes from the original proposal, where we, you know, engage with the community on the forum post and say, yeah, introduce ourselves. You know, there's an element of trust there, which is not what blockchain people really like. So I mean, I won't lie, we did speak about this yesterday when we had a chat, and something I never really thought of, but Anna brought up, was like, maybe there should be a scope for this concept of kind of offboarding, of saying there needs to be a mechanism for the community's disapproval. And I mean, that's all there. Like, if the community doesn't like what Prezenti is doing over time, 6 months in, where we're funding gambling apps and lottery apps and random stuff for our friends, or anything, you know, just complete misappropriation and off mission. You know, there is a mechanism there for the community to come together and say, we want to reject this approval on the funds that we have. And you know, we want to remain flexible and listen to the feedback of the community. You know, we've created a Discord, which I know isn't the best way. Everyone has 100 of them and 1,000 messages coming in. But we want to remain completely open to feedback, and you know, interact in the forum and the other mechanisms that Celo already has. So, yeah.
Yeah, similar, and like the way that we want to just be super transparent. We like do updates, and we hold community calls. We've actually gotten into this. It was gating these community calls with like Celo NFTs and things like that, just so that we can get active participants to be like committed. And so those are like little things that we're doing, but overall, as like a sentiment, I feel like it's important, if anyone's out there, people are watching, they're like, hey, I want to go to any community and propose having like a community fund or some DAO that is funding initiatives. You have like a pretty huge responsibility to be on top of what can benefit the actual overall ecosystem, and like you have the responsibility of going from like 100,000 foot view down to like at least 1,000 foot view. And one of those, like the tenets of that can be like, you need to stick to your guns on some things and be like, hey, especially for like, if you were coming at it from our perspective, which is like, we want to fund like impactful infrastructure that could like help radically change areas of Celo. That is something where like you want to update the community and you want to keep people involved, but you also need to like shepherd and say like, hey, here's my sources, here's why we think this idea is a good idea, or here's why this grant that came to us is a really good idea. It may seem off base, it may seem crazy, but just like remember that there's a whole zeitgeist here happening in the underbelly of crypto, and trust us to be like a part of that zeitgeist and present you with like reasonable proposals. And that has been a really guiding light for this ecosystem, but also other ecosystems. It's like, this is all just mass like social coordination. And so we need to like have people who are able to stick to their perspectives and like refine them and bring people into the fold, instead of what tends to happen in a lot of layer 1 ecosystems, or just ecosystems that have a lot of money, which is people get comfortable and they get in a flow of kind of looking to a specific North Star for all guidance. And in reality, it's like that over time will actually creates less opportunities for all of the people and creates less like design space for people to actually capitalize on.
Absolutely, yeah, and trust goes both ways, and yeah, you have to have trust with your community, and your community has to trust you to steward these funds. Yeah, Kevin?
Yeah, so with the foundation grants, we've been doing this since mainnet, and there's been a lot of learning in the progress. I think one of the feedback from community and also from folks who are applying was the sort of length of the time that we take between different waves of applications, and so that was the community feedback. And what we try to do with that is to keep it on a rolling basis so that anyone can apply at any time. I think, I mean, Anna would know, but some of the best grants that we usually get are people who actually engage the community directly on the forum, on Discord, and we engage with them. They reach out to us, and we enter into conversation, and then we see how grants becomes a part of that. So I think the more we are like working with people, we see everyone as partners, right? Like, I mean, Jarrell, to your point, like if you're just like getting these applications and you're not really thinking about them, you're mostly like just, you're kind of like in your silo without getting that kind of feedback loop. And I think that's what we are doing also at the foundation. We listen in, we try to understand where what project makes sense. So we do a community call, or we do an ecosystem call, or we do a ground office hours, and someone turns up and says, hey, I have this idea, and then we try to connect them with the right person. We figure out like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense. This makes sense. Okay, maybe we can do grant for this, and try to like, just move on in terms of both the process as well as looking at the execution. I mean, the other thing is also like, trying to understand what the founder needs, because usually they think they need a grant, but many times, it may not be what they need. They may need some kind of like, resource or some kind of help in terms of marketing, or in terms of like just figuring out token economics. So there it gets interesting, because what we also tend to do is like connect with people in the community who are doing those things, or at the foundation who are also willing to help, time permitting. So it's a mix of these kind of like, getting those sort of like touch points from different members of the community and figuring out like what they need, and then kind of like playing the role of funding, but also like playing the role of connecting them. Yeah. Yeah,
and the feedback loops. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add on to that, at Ocelot, Ocelot stands for Original Celo Treasury. I just feel like I'm saying that name over and over again. But yeah, so we do like something similar, but since like you were describing, it's only so many people can review grants at a time. One thing that we found strength in is like going to essentially coalitions that are already getting a bunch of grants. So people like Gitcoin would be, or the Gitcoin's grants community, and we just made sure that Ocelot kind of got a, I think we do actually, check my math on this, yes, I think we have like a council seat or whatever on the Gitcoin's grants thing. And so we got there, and we just basically vampire attack a lot of people that are coming into the Gitcoin's grants community. And a lot of the stuff that they're doing is in regions that our Celo already has like a pretty big presence in. And so it was a really solid way for us to almost like get through the noise and the chaos and say, if you've gotten this far in the Gitcoin's grants process, have you met Celo?
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I mean, we're also like, in terms of we do the Gitcoin rounds as well, and especially for early stage projects, we definitely recommend that. And Aaron, you mentioned like Questbook. So that's also like a tool that we are exploring to use on-chain for transparency, also for like small-scale grants where decision-making should not take much time. And we can also like do bounties and bug fixes, and have community ambassadors, for example. So I think the more we sort of interact with folks, across the ecosystem, the more we learn about things that we can possibly do. At the foundation, we are trying to like mix best practices with different, sort of ways of allocating funds. So the very traditional sort of, you apply for a grant, you wait, that model works to some extent. More active community engagement works in some instance. And of course, for smaller grants, where the focus is on very specific stuff like bounties and just trying to fix something, like an on-chain tool works best for us. So we're trying to use all that as much as we can. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and the foundation has started doing matching rounds as well to help us as a discovery mechanism for the community to help decide, what grants we should be funding. Amazing. Well, we're running pretty close to time. We didn't really get as much time to go into how can we all collaborate, but I hope this was an amazing space for us to kind of talk about all of this, and then maybe in the future we can talk a lot more around how the funds can collaborate. Jarrell, did you want to add to that? I have one last question that I would love to have
go for
everyone
it. Go for it.
Yeah, well, I was hoping, I guess a year from now, if we're sitting on this panel, which I hope we are, what do you hope that the different funds have accomplished in a year, and what do you hope to see 1 year today at Celo Community and the Celo ecosystem?
Oh, that's a hard one. I hope we are able to give out all of the funds, basically. I hope that there are enough high quality applications and that we have to reject very few. And I hope most of them fulfill their goals, and that we've kind of helped them, in a way, shepherd their metrics and milestones so that they're really quite effective. I can't think of any specific thing like I want to see a certain size thing in a certain country or anything like that. But yeah, we want to give it out. We want to make that as smooth as possible.
So my guiding light in a lot of these ways is microeconomic infiltration. And so it would be great if the people that we support and the projects that we support and whoever leads those and does what they do, if they build into their protocol layers small microeconomic infiltration, so where it's this money goes towards the Celo Community Fund, or this money goes towards Impact Market, which is usually who I'm shilling. Because I kind of think that Celo is a different layer one than Ethereum, even though it's essentially a copy pasta for a Go version, but it has the ability to create dependencies on each other, light dependencies or light support networks, wherein I think in a lot of areas of the Ethereum ecosystem or Cosmos or others, it's hey, well, this is a really cool thing you built. That was a really cool thing you built. I'm coming in a year and a half later, and let me connect it and do a little thing that'll send funds to you. Where in Celo, I actually think from a native status has the ability to create a lot of these interdependency networks, and we just have to be a guiding light around the people that we're funding to be and advocating for that foundation layer to be built. And so that's, I think a year from now would be awesome if Impact Market had funds coming from multiple different protocols that had been funded by all of us, and that's in a way that we can collaborate. And then it would be awesome if there was just a lot more funds that were much more focused. I think that we are all representing pretty broadly focused funds, and you said it's a lot different than it was a year ago. And a year from now, it'd be great if there was more niche focused.
Very much agree so on that.
Yeah, I think 1 year from now, I think with the grants, what we want to achieve is make sure that projects are sustainable. We want to make sure that they keep building on Celo, so that comes without saying. What we're also aiming is also to focus on process efficiencies. I talked about some tooling that we're going to be using. But I think the big picture is obviously how all these things interact with each other, which is where the composability part comes in. And I think it should be much easier for a project launching on Celo to be able to raise funds, to be able to deploy in different apps, to use different tooling much easily, also with all these bridging solutions to move assets. I think the big picture is that all of this interdependency should be very seamless. And as we can achieve that, and if possible, if we can achieve that in 1 year, I think a lot of things will be taken care of. Yeah.
Amazing. Lightning round, where do people find you to apply? Kevin.
Well, Telegram, Discord, Twitter, Telegram, Kevin_Tharayil, Discord, Kevin Celo Foundation, Twitter, Kevin Tharayil, yeah.
I mean, I also meant the fund, but yes. Also, Kevin, please follow Kevin. But yeah, the Celo ecosystem grants.
Just send me a message on Telegram. That's faster, or on Discord. Yeah, but yeah, celoecosystem.com/grants. That's the inbound picture.
Yeah, so ocelot.xyz, ocelotlabs.xyz, and then same on Twitter, and I think that's mostly it. You can hit me up on Twitter as well, at TechBoyAfrica, BOI, and so that would probably, we have like a form that you can find on the website, I believe.
Nice. Aaron?
Yeah, we have a website, prezenti.xyz. We're not open for applications just yet. We're still, working on our back-end admin and everything. We also have a Discord that currently we're just chatting in, but later on we'll kind of publish all of that and open that up for everyone to chat with us.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.